It's time to set sail in another Roll for Crit expansion video, but in this one, you'll be sailing on your own because we're taking a look at the newest expansion for Imperial Settlers Empires of the North, titled Wrath of the Lighthouse. This is a solo campaign expansion, meaning you'll be playing the game on your own through a campaign setting. You'll be playing as only one of the groups from the core set, possibly expansions if you have them, going through each scenario and win or lose, moving on to a new one, possibly different depending on what the storybook tells you. Now, we put Imperial Settlers Empires of the North as one of our favorite games back when it came out in 2019. The question is, does this expansion seem worthy as an addition to this, or maybe even your favorite form to play this game? It's probably not a big shocker, but you need to play through these solo rules for this game, meaning there's a few tweaks compared to the regular rules of Empires of the North. I suggest that you probably play at least one game of the regular solo variants before trying out the story. I admit I got one thing wrong my first game through and had to reset my campaign, which was, it's fine, it's one game, but it does change a few little things. First off, you'll be playing only 4 rounds trying to meet the requirements of the scenario you're in, whether it be one of the campaign ones or one of the standalone ones. Usually, it's meeting a certain score threshold and maybe a couple of other things as well. Outside the 4 rounds, the general rules you'll need to worry about happen at the start of a round and the end. In the first round, the lookout phase when you get some more cards, you will also be triggering one of the events which are included in the scenario. You'll randomly choose one of the number tokens which are usually used to mark the neutral boats during the regular game, triggering whichever event matches the token you pull. The other big thing involves the actions during the cleanup. During the game, you usually place these action tokens to activate different actions. During the cleanup phase, usually you just take them off, but in the single player mode, once you take them off, you will flip them over to their solo mode, pretty much making them a bit more expensive to trigger that action. In addition, let's say that we place our tokens here next round and didn't use that one. Anything that is yellow or on the solo mode gets flipped over if it was not used, meaning there's going to be a bit more of a back and forth maybe of rotating which actions you use, or at the very least being forced to pay some more resources. Those are the core solo rules that will stay connected throughout the game. However, each scenario are going to have a ton of different setup rules, and with this being campaign may add or remove even more setup changes, which actually I think brings us perfectly into the Wrath of the Lighthouse. For Wrath of the Lighthouse, you're going to select one clan and only one. That is the one you play with. You're going to still set them up whatever their rules are. There are not cards you will add later on designed specifically for a clan, nor is there anything I could find in the rulebook story that would say do something different if you're playing as a specific group. Now, this is the scenario booklet I have set up here. This will tell you all the rules changes, any setup changes, as well as the scoring changes and what the actual end game goal is. Usually, they'll add some extra things, possibly some tokens, which could change up how the game is played or at least what your strategy is. So make sure you read everything there that you need to. It also includes 2 things here, the events we already went over, so that's not special for solo mode, but they also have special actions. These will have unique properties that may ask you to spend something or have something completed. And if you do, you're able to mark them with a token, not one of the ones you used up there. It's one in a color not used. Sometimes they'll have an X there like that, meaning they're one-time events, usually because it has a story attached to it. That means those will be no longer available for the rest of the game. Otherwise, at the end of each round, this will clean up for these actions to be repeated again. There's a bit of an introduction as well as throughout the entire thing, especially the game end, which will tell you to read certain passage numbers in a book. That book being this one, you'll flip it open to the number, and I should blur this right now, which telling you things that could occur, as well as writing things down, getting resources, little story beats, things of that nature. Speaking of writing down, since this is a campaign, you're going to be keeping track what happens between matches, and that's where this sheet comes in. Nothing is written on this sheet because I photocopy it because I'm that kind of paranoid person. Now, you'll put your chosen clan name up here just in case you forgot, and you'll be marking wins and losses as well as some other resources here. Big thing before I go over those is this box here, setup changes. You may write up things like, make sure to include this card in setup, or this card has been removed from the game. So that could completely change what you have available when the game starts. Now, let's actually talk about each of these separately. First, this top row, these are a unique resource, and I won't say much else beyond that because that's more story-related things. The next is the crop event deck and the naval event deck. These are special decks which, once created, you will draw from for the crop, when you do the harvest action, and the naval when you do the sail action. You won't get the entire deck. You'll be told usually at the start to get like 16, 18, 19, 20, 21. And you'll have those cards available. And depending on win and losses, you may cross off or add even more cards to the deck. Naval deck works just like the crop deck. There's just more options that may occur. Finally, this here is for the Lighthouse followers. These are special green meeple. As you can see, they're very cute, and they pretty much act just like your regular workers here, except they've got some cool stuff going on depending on how you play the story. The rest of the game will play pretty much how Empires of the North plays, except you'll be just doing actions on your own, making sure to keep in mind all the rules for solo, such as the 4 rounds, the flipping those over for the special mode, and the events. Everything else should work the same. You'll have your islands. There are no new islands for you to mess with. Your deck should still play just as that deck intended from whatever set it's from. And hopefully you'll be able to reach the win option to hit the next scenario. But if you lose, you do still get to move on to another scenario, usually a different one, giving you a chance for redemption. Keep in mind, if you lose 3 in a row, that ends the campaign completely, as well as there's technically one other weird loss condition that I won't bring up right now. But otherwise, you'll play through the entire scenario, and at the very end, you'll see if you won or lost. There's a couple other conditions depending on how you do during the entire campaign. This is basically just a bunch of scenarios chained together with a somewhat of a story going on, telling you it's not the most like big in-depth one, but it's a fine one nonetheless, especially because the gameplay is already fun. We enjoyed Empires of the North before, and honestly, this was, I guess for me, a little bit more enjoyable because I could get the islands I wanted if I was able to. They were never stolen before me. That's just my own little thing. I don't think that's the game's fault kind of issue. In terms of the campaign, comparing to others, I really hate to say this because I feel like it's so unfair to other ones, but I like this one a little bit more because it's solo in mind. I have a lot of different campaigns going on, including games that I would have loved to play, but part of the problem is the people weren't around, and I've been waiting on them because they want to be part of it. They want to see what happens next. They don't want to miss a game. So even the ones that can be played with different groups of people, it makes me feel a little guilty. This is solo. It's just me. I can have fun. Hypothetically, I could have just gone over and played it whenever I felt like pulling it down. I rushed this for the video, so that technically is not something I can comment on. But the games themselves, I think, are a solid pacing through the 4 rounds. The extra rules can be really challenging sometimes very easy. It also could depend on what group you're on. I only played through with one group. I didn't try out every single group. That said, you can do that, and that's one of the things that's sort of nice about this is also a really great way to maybe learn a clan. You really get to see where you kept failing, where you kept doing well. Granted, it might not perfectly be brought over during the multiplayer, as certain groups can be a bit more meaner or might be able to interact with other players in ways that the solo can't offer. Regardless, I felt like I got to know my clan much better. That said, even though there are additional cards, not only in the naval and grain decks that I talked about, but there are some other cards I didn't mention as well that you may get throughout the campaign, that some of them even flip over to stronger variants depending on what you do or have you read certain passages. They are very general, and it's not a terrible thing. It means even if you have an expansion, you can try them out. There are 2 groups, I can't remember which ones, but you're not supposed to play with. When I think about a lot of times when I like campaigns, part of it is seeing myself grow in a way that makes sense. Like the warrior unlocks very specific warrior traits. You play a wizard, you unlock new spells. You're not unlocking specific powers or cards that are really geared or designed for your group in mind. It's an understandable kind of thing that's not included. This makes it pretty much future-proof, more or less, for whatever other clans or groups they add in. But it does make it feel a little bit disappointing and not nearly as fun to jump in with another group. It's not like, oh man, I can't see what I unlocked for the Egyptians this time around kind of deal. That could be me just what I want more from other games. I like the branching of the scenarios a bit. They do change up, but it isn't like a huge web when you're going to get a very different ending depending on whether you go like A, B, C, G, through the mapping. It's not done by letters, but it is what you'd probably expect more from a very simple kind of web in most video games, where regardless of what you do, you still end pretty much at the same point. But you still have fun, at least in the first time you go through this. And honestly, because they're just solo scenarios and trying out a new group and maybe just getting better with that group, I could probably play through this again, and I probably wouldn't mind doing that just at that slower pace. Because I didn't try every group, I don't know if one group is much easier through this campaign, when one's much harder, and I'm pretty fine with that. Outside, I don't know why the two groups aren't mentioned, if they just brick and just it's impossible for them, or vice versa, it makes it too easy. But in terms of most of the groups, by the way, the two that are mentioned are expansion factions. I should mention that. So that if you just have the base in this, that's 6 factions that can play this campaign. You don't have to worry about that. Overall, the solo connective story, it was fun most of the time, just because I'm having fun collecting and doing this. I wish there were, not even with the clans. The clans I get, they're not being too much. It was fun to get more of the 2 decks, these cards getting added or removed, depending on what was going on. But I also wish maybe some islands got added that maybe changed up, or very story specific things. This does add tons of weird, unique rules. I'm gonna flip a page and try to maybe blur some things out if I can. But there could be special maps that you place things on, as of course with the special actions. So it does try to change up each time and really change up what you're going for. And it also includes plenty of tokens for you to use. I don't want to show them off too much, so you can learn and discover them for yourself. And overall, I will say, going as this is an expansion, we have the hate, great, or wait. For me, it's a great. It has everything I want. I like campaigns, but the fact it's solo means I can play it at my pace. I don't have to wait for people. This feels like me buying a single player video game, which is the kind of games I tend to enjoy in that style. It's not like the as deep story. This is not Mass Effect 2, but it's a fun experience regardless. And having this campaign doesn't make the regular base unplayable until you finish it. Because the base already includes 6 factions, whichever one you choose, it's actually, the box is designed so that you can slot everything in as like a save state, including the one clan you use, but the base still has 5 other clans, and that's not including expansions. So you can still play regular games of Empires of the North if you wanted to, if your game group wanted to. You just might have that one faction in a different box, which shouldn't be a problem unless someone gets really, really feels like they need it. That said, I understand a lot of this is definitely personal preference. If you're not a campaign guy, or you like Empires North because a lot of the player interaction, it's not going to be so high for you. This doesn't add some new mechanics here for you to use in the multiplayer game. This is only for solo play. It doesn't really add like a new faction for you to use. It doesn't add new fun islands that you can just throw in there from now on. Everything is meant to really be with that solo experience campaign. And I find that to be fine. I think that's enjoyable. I had a great time going through it. And I wish I could go through it at my own pace, but I wanted to actually get this video out in time, which I didn't, because this is, I think, should be available now. I know it was released at Essen Spiel, but regardless, if you do like Empires of the North and you're not against campaigns or solo play, then I think you will agree with me on putting this more towards the great side. It's giving you a way to play this game on your own time. You only have to know your own schedule rather than trying to meet everyone up to try to play through this. And it's also a really fun, great way to maybe mess around with the clan and really try to learn the little things you should be looking out for. If there's a certain card that seems stronger or weaker. Now, you'll have to keep in mind that some of these may increase or decrease in power depending on, obviously, single versus playing with other opponents, but you'll still get a much better grasp on whichever clan you use. I only wish there was either some new fun islands or maybe ways to really make the clan-specific cards, but I understand that those would have been maybe a little bit harder to include, and maybe for some of those people who would feel more of a weight on this would be a bit angry because they don't like the single the single campaign, but they still feel guilty not buying it because they're missing out on some new components for the groups. So I guess overall, this actually is a better choice, even though those are things I would like to see in this campaign. Let me know if you've had the chance to try out Wrath of the Lighthouse, how far you got in it. Did you really love the story? Do you think the story is being more propped up because it already has a solid gameplay mechanic underneath it? And which faction did you use? Did you think your faction was too good, or it was much harder for your faction to get through the campaign? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you think someone would be interested, please share this video with them. And of course, there's all the usual stuff YouTube likes, the like, share, subscribe. It helps keep what little lands I have up and running. But for now, I'm Will, and this has been a Roll for Crit expansion review.